South Africa is our land. South Africa belongs to all the people who live here in South Africa. It does not belong to Donald Trump. He can keep his America. And Ene is even worse. He is even worse. When I meet him, I will tell him. I will say, you, Donald Trump, you are even worse because your forebears came to America. They found the indigenous Americans. They wiped them out. They killed nearly all of them. Rine, we are living as a nation.
Well, that was hectic.
Too hectic.
How are you, Sia? How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm puzzled, man. I'm puzzled. There's just a lot happening in South Africa right now. I feel like everybody's coming at us sideways, from Trump to Lesotho to Rwanda.
Yeah, but
I can't keep up.
Let's talk about like the Trump thing today, because I feel like that's what everyone's talking about. That's what everyone's going crazy about.
Yeah.
So let's start from the beginning. Like, what happened? What's going on? Please bring us up to speed.
I mean, myself and many other South Africans woke up on the 3rd of February to Trump's social media post. So it was on True Social, which is Trump's social media platform, and then obviously these were also posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, basically. And Trump
But according to it's cool.
According to what?
According to Mr. Kanye West, you can't call X Twitter anymore.
What did he say?
He was like, calling X Twitter is like calling Kanye.
Oh, wow.
But
a lot of special people in the US, man. Anywho, Donald Trump posted, South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. It is a situation that the radical left media doesn't want to so much mention. A massive human rights violation at a minimum is happening for all to see. The United States won't stand for it. We will act. Also, I will be cutting off all future funding to South Africa until a full investigation of the situation has been completed. I'm sure you woke up to the same tweet, man.
I was like, dude, what are you talking about?
I just give me a feel of what your reaction was. Like,
I feel like, in my honest opinion,
I
think that there's a lot of misinformation that is going around.
Yeah.
And I think that the whole expropriation bill, as much as it is contentious and many South Africans have every right to feel the way that they feel about it, I mean, we are not going to agree on the same policies as a democratic nation. However, I think that President Trump is bringing a false narrative which needs to be debunked. And that is why we are here today, to kind of bring some sense into this whole matter that's going on, So what do you make of this whole situation?
Okay, so firstly, this is post Cyril Ramaphosa signing the Expropriation Act bill, right? And then obviously this is what sparked what's going right now. And I just want to explain the act or the bill. First of all, it is not a confiscation instrument, as the tweet is suggesting that land is being confiscated from certain people in South Africa. It's not a confiscation instrument, but a constitutionally mandated legal process that ensures public access to land in an equitable and just manner as guided by the Constitution. I mean, South Africa, like the US and other countries, have always had these laws, and they balance the need for public usage of land and the protection of the rights of property owners. Look, let us even dwell on that a bit. It protects the right of the property owners.
Exactly.
So no one is trying to illegally steal land.
Yes.
That was happening in 1948 apartheid time.
Exactly.
No one is trying to steal land from anybody.
Yes. And if you're being honest, that whole stealing of the land that happened in the 19 what, that's what's actually trying to be addressed. That's what the government is trying to reform, because there's obviously huge inequality in terms of the amount of people who own a certain amount of land. Because if you're being honest, the white minority in South Africa own majority of the land. I don't know the exact numbers. Can you please bring me up the exact numbers?
Exactly. Like you're saying, to understand the importance of this legislation, one must consider the stark disparities in land ownership. Because according to the Department of Agriculture, Land and Reform and Rural Development, 72% of privately owned land is held by white South Africans, despite them comprising less than 10% of the population, right? And black South Africans, who make up over 80% of the population, own less than 9% of the agricultural land. And then they go on to say that women, particularly living in rural areas, often face systematic barriers to owning land, with less than 13% of female-headed households owning land formerly titled to their names. So these stats clearly paint a clear picture for us that the inequalities entrenched in South Africa's land markets. There are inequalities, obviously, entrenched in South Africa's land markets. And that's why I believe that this Expropriation Act that Cyril has passed is very much necessary.
So my question is, what does President Trump mean when he says that South Africa is mistreating certain classes unfairly? Or who are these certain classes that South Africa is, quote unquote, treating unfairly?
First of all, we can see how vague
yes.
that post was.
I mean, he wasn't even providing evidence.
Who are the certain classes of people? You can see that he did no investigation.
Yes.
He's not backing it up by facts. It's like, it's a broken telephone.
Yes.
He shared, she said. And he's like, oh, okay, based on that and the influence that I have, let me make this social media post and call it a day. Because I'm in power. I can say what I want. I can do what I want. But you know what? We cannot shy away from the fact that the post that he made did instill some fear in South African citizens to be like, okay, if Trump says that he's going to stop funding South Africa, what does it mean for us economically? I mean, the US is they play a huge, it's one of the world's biggest economies.
It's the most powerful nation in the world, if you're being honest, you know?
Yeah. So also, I do understand that we do need trade access, you know, whether to import, export stuff to them, you know, but I don't think it's to the extent where we should be so worried if the US took all its funding away from us. It does impact us. It does. It really does. And to the extent of what happened last week as well with the US aid, for example.
Yes.
I don't know if you...
to my understanding, last week, President Trump freezed all funding, you know, that USA would give to, you know, health programs and
like
all that.
WHO and the
like
USA.
WHO and the USA, yes. And that obviously impacted South Africa as many clinics had to close, right?
Yeah.
And President Ramaphosa, in response to Trump's post, he basically said that, you know, South Africa isn't confiscating land the way that Trump is claiming, right? And he assured South Africans that apart from the AIDS program, where USA provides, I think, 17%, there's no other significant funding that South Africa receives from the USA.
Yeah.
Right? So...
so that's according to Ramaphosa.
Yes, to Ramaphosa.
And then according to the African Growth and Opportunity Act, they play a crucial role in facilitating trade between the two economies. So the South African and the United States economies, right? And basically, the SA Chamber of Commerce said that, okay, well, they were founded in 2020 Atlanta. I must just put that out there. And basically, they promote the interest of South African business in the US, right? And they did say that if our trade access falls away, right, so vehicle and boat exporters, as well as jewelry, citrus, and wine producers will be hit the hardest.
Yes.
This will be in terms of like job losses, and there could be economic instability. But I don't think it's to the extent where we as South Africa will not function as a whole should the US withdraw its funding to us.
Yes.
And you know, it goes back to really trying to identify what is the deeper. What's the root of this? I don't think it's the act.
I mean, the act is basically, I think they're using the act as an excuse to get to us. But if we take a really deeper look at it, I mean, let's backtrack to, was it beginning of last year, if I'm not mistaken, where South Africa took Israel to court, you know, basically saying that they are committing genocide in Palestine. And obviously, Israel is backed by the USA. So USA basically felt embarrassed by South Africa bringing Israel to court. So I think they're trying to get to South Africa for embarrassing them. Another thing is South Africa's involvement in BRICS.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
Obviously, USA/Trump. Trump actually came out and said that these BRICS nations are trying to create a currency that will bring down the dominance of USA in the global markets, right? And he even threatened 100% tariffs. And if you can see in the news, he's been imposing tariffs on Canada, Mexico, China. But that's a story for another day, right?
Yes.
So the deeper issue is that USA and South Africa are there's this conflict over these different issues. So I feel like the expropriation bill and certain organizations in South Africa which are lobbying in USA, you know, which is making the issue worse. I think these are the deep issues at play that's bringing this conflict about.
It's like the cherry on top.
It's like
It's like scapegoat, basically.
Yeah, the scapegoat, exactly.
You know, I just want to clarify the Expropriation Act. You know, I just want to read something for those that are listening so that they can understand the act better, you know, so that people are not thinking that this act is just some act that allows the states to come or some random person to come and say, we're taking your land, we're stealing your land.
Exactly.
That's not, if anything, our land was stolen. Yes. But okay, so the amount of compensation must be just and equitable, reflecting an equitable balance between the public interests, the interest of those affected, including an owner, right? Having regard to all relevant circumstances, including the current use of the property, right? So you'll state what is the current use of the property, the history of the acquisition and the use of property, the market value of the property, right? And in determining the amount of compensation to be paid in terms of this act, the expropriating authority must not, unless there are special circumstances in which it would be just and equitable to do so, take account of the fact that the property has been taken without the consent of the owner or the holder of rights. Right. And then there's an interesting thing that you also said about the state of, or something like that. I just I want you to.
So basically, right, let me just quickly look for. Oh yes, so another contentious point of this whole expropriation bill is that under certain circumstances there will be nil compensation paid in the act of expropriation.
Yes.
However, it's important to note what exactly these conditions are. So Section 12(3)(b) of the expropriation bill says, it may be just and equitable for nil compensation to be paid where land is expropriated in the public interest, having regard to all relevant circumstances, including, but not limited to, 1, where the land is not being used and the owner's main purpose is not to develop the land or use it to generate income, but to benefit from appreciation of its market value. So my interpretation of this is, if land is not being used by a certain person and they're not using it for any important purpose, then the government may find it just and equitable to expropriate that land for public interest or public purpose, you know. So it's not necessarily them aggressively taking land which someone is using, like they're making it seem to be. Second one says, where an organ of state holds land that is not using for its core functions and is not reasonably likely to require the land for its future activities in that regard, and the organ of state acquired the land for no consideration. So when it says an organ of state, it's basically saying another part of government. So if another part of government is not using that land, and obviously, as we know, back then when the National Party or whatever it was took land,
the National Party,
yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously they also took land unfairly for no consideration. So is it really unfair for a government to take a part of land that a part of government has that they're not using? Would you say that that's unfair? Would you say that that's unjust?
Personally, I don't think it's unfair, but I think our listeners should really think of everything that we've said and how we've broken down this act.
Yes.
And consider why this was put in place to begin with.
Yes.
And let's just see how it all unfolds in the days to come. And I know Trump, well, Cyril Ramaphosa did say that he's very much open to going to speak to Trump, explaining himself. And another thing I feel is very important, to everyone that is reading news publications about what is happening, what's going on, is it's important to understand South African policies, read about them, understand the historical background of certain laws and why they're in place before just making any comments on social media, and so with that being said, do you want to wrap it up?
So yeah, I mean, just to wrap things up, I think that this is a very controversial issue, which obviously it kind of exposes the divisions in South Africa when it comes to race and land. I think that
which is nothing new.
It's nothing new. I just think that Trump basically shed light on an issue which is very sensitive in South Africa, and it's an issue which needs addressing because, honestly speaking, a lot of people were disadvantaged. A lot of people were robbed of their land back then, and people still continue to feel the disadvantages today. I don't know if you have
the
any
apartheid laws.
Of the apartheid laws. I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to wrap this up.
No, like I said, we're going to see in the days to come how it all unfolds, and I hope that Cyril Ramaphosa will try and knock some sense into Trump's head. Let's see how that unfolds. And
well, we'll be back together. But yeah, guys, thank you for listening to our podcast. This is Mtshali, Siyanda and Kat. Why are we in it?